Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. And she's here today to share with us her new book, Bringing Death to Life, an uplifting exploration of living, dying, the soul journey, and the afterlife. Now, Dr. Mary Helen is a metaphysical healer, chiropractor, and international inspirational speaker. She has authored numerous books, including Promised by Heaven, The Chakra Fairies, The Pocket Coach, and she co-authored the book that we're going to be speaking about today, Bringing Death to Life. She lives in Ireland with her 2 daughters, and she's here to join us today. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Mary Helen Hensley.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, what a joy it is to have you here to talk about your book. And my goodness, I mean, you are so amazingly gifted. I understand that you're a renowned chiropractor in Ireland. You have a very successful business. I have to ask you, when did you become interested in metaphysical healing?
Well, it's been something that's been kind of with me most of my life, and it really, I guess, became enhanced in 1991 after I was in a 75 mile per hour collision and broke my neck, and I died, and had a wonderful experience, a great near-death experience, and near life as we come back. And from that 1991, from that day forward, is when my life in metaphysics really kind of took off.
So what was it like for you in those early years? How does spirit or the universe communicate with you?
Well, from the time that I was very young, I was always able to see people who were in spirit. And so, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Martinsville, Virginia, and my father was a minister amongst other things. And so I grew up in a very kind of traditional Southern Baptist background. And I was a bit of a challenge to my parents, because from the time I was, able to speak, basically, I had been communicating with my mother's father, Dr. Garland Clark, who had been a surgeon and doctor in Kentucky. And from, I guess, at age 2, 3, 4, I was 4 when we finally had the talk, which is when my parents had to sit me down. And, my father, he was a wonderful speaker and this great, deep, booming Southern accent. And he said, "Sugar, I think we need to have a little talk. Do you understand the difference between alive and dead?"
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I was like, and he was explaining, alive, somebody who's in a body, and dead being somebody who's not. And, all of a sudden, you're 4 years old going, oh, because I was talking about things, about my grandfather, Judge, as we called him, that there's no way I could have known unless I had known him or spoken to him, or these stories that my parents, of course, would have known, but that me at that age, he had died when I was 1. And so they suddenly began to realize that something a little unusual was going on in the house, and that's kind of how it began. And he was the first person that I could ever communicate with, and to this day, my closest confidant.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I'm sure your dad's probably listening, at the time he's listening to these stories going, okay, there's no way she can know about all these things she's telling us, something miraculous is going on, but we've got to prepare her for the real world.
Exactly. And he was, he recognized that something very bizarre was happening, and he couldn't fit it quite into his way of thinking, but he also had to admit that it was happening. And, there my mother was secretly absolutely delighted, because this was her father. And so she's recognizing that although he had passed, that her little girl could suddenly speak to him. And so she was kind of, while Dad wanted to be very protective, Mom was just, kind of yay over in the corner.
She's probably secretly taking you off going, tell me more.
Yeah, oh, always. Yes, absolutely. And still, she'll be 91 next week. And, our days, this last while, because we talk every single day, and I would have regular visits from her father, and we talk about them and all the time. And it's such a wonderful thing for her to be able to verify and reminisce. And it's a very exciting, and I'm so grateful to be able to do that. And he's been wonderful, because it's like having your own spiritual doctor who's constantly keeping you in the know about what's going on around you. So as you can imagine, over the last little while, that's been quite handy to have his insights as to what's been happening in the world around us right now.
Oh, I can imagine. And, it has me kind of wondering here too. I mean, when as you're growing up, you're having these influences. Is this what kind of motivated you to go into the line of work that you're in?
Well, what's so funny about that is that, obviously, being a surgeon, he was a medical doctor. And after I had the accident, and ended up breaking the neck, and I had a whole lot of injuries to my spine as a result of the accident. You can imagine I was T-boned at 75 miles an hour. So I was hit into the driver's side of the car, which folded the car in half. And so I had a whole lot of injury to deal with afterwards. And it was Judge who actually came to me in my recovery and said, "You're going to be going to school to become a chiropractor." And I said, "A what?" And he said, "A chiropractor." And I barely even knew what that was at that stage. I think I'd been to one once when I was in college from a rowing injury, and had really no idea what that was all about. And he said, "You'll understand later for the work that you're going to have to do that." And he would always talk about we need you to go and have an education that is more well-rounded, mind, body, spirit, understanding that a human being is not just their pieces and parts, that there's many components, each equally being as important. And we need you not just to focus on the physical aspect of the body, but the integration of the emotional body, the spiritual body, as well as the physical body, in order to allow a human to have a complete experience. And I'm like, okay. I had just finished 4 years of college. I went to school in South Carolina, and I had literally just graduated that May, and the accident took place on the 14th of December. And so I was like, "Are you serious? I'm going back to school."
Oh
This
boy.
was the last thing on my list. So, but I've always listened, and he's never steered me wrong, and off I went. And that's how I got into it and understood then at that stage the idea behind what they wanted me to do was to be able to get my hands on as many different people as possible with, a host of different um, ailments, be they physical, emotional, and to be able to know what that felt like. Not just in the way that they presented symptomatically, but the way that when I put my hands on them, that I would receive the information. And this was the key as to why I became a chiropractor.
Well, I love how that story is and everything comes together, and also how your grandfather uses the royal we, like you're going to be
Yeah.
going to school. Like we are going to be doing this education. It's really you doing
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was quite a shock. And it was one of those things, you remember graduating from college, and finally, after all of those years of education, I'm driving away from college, looking in the rear view mirror, and I'm so excited, and I weren't going back, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm sorry, how long is this schooling? And you want me to become a doctor? I had a double degree in communications and graphic design. So as you can imagine, science was not heavy in my background. So I had to go back, and get an associate's degree in chemistry and physics, which was like pulling teeth. It was probably the one thing that stood to deter me from, getting that doctorate, because that was definitely not my forte. I was a right brainer all the way. So it was quite a struggle in those early days trying to get my head around, organic chemistry and physics. And but when your life's been set on a path and that's what you've got to do, that's what you've got to do.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what a path you've been on, my goodness. It was such an interesting journey because, it's really like going back to school and learning to be a chiropractor. That's a whole nother skill set. I mean, from what you were prepared for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was. I put up a little bit of a protest, but I remember you just go, okay, all right, this is the way it's going to unfold. Because when I was in that space between when I had physically died, everything opened up. It's like moving into a space of, oh yeah, the veil is lifted, and suddenly your amnesia is gone, and you're like, oh, that's why I came here. Oh my gosh. And literally at that stage, I was 21 years old and I had set up for myself, which was quite the surprise, let me tell you. If I hadn't managed to remember what I had come here for, this accident had been put in place for me to literally get knocked back onto the path that I had come here to fulfill. So yeah, it was quite the shock.
Oh my gosh. Like, oh, I put a fail safe in here for me,
Exactly.
Mm. Well, so how has this just fabulous spiritual education, this metaphysical education, helped you, and how is it integrated in the practice that you have?
Well, it's been interesting because I go. Yeah, once I graduated, I moved to Philadelphia, and I practiced there for a year. But the whole time that I was there, I was desperately trying to get to Ireland because I knew via a series of events that had happened that was the next place for me to go. When I was still actually in my final year of chiropractic school, I had begun seeing a series of visions, and they were these symbols, and they were flaming like it was. It was like the burning bush kind of scenario in my life because these symbols were presenting themselves and they were coming in groups of three and they appeared to be some kind of ancient alphabet. And so I became just passionate, obsessed nearly in finding the origin. And so one thing leads to another, and I end up in Ireland. And that's where I needed to be for the next leg of the journey, let's say. And so I had to go there. I set up my practice. And it was during the course of this last 2 decades of living in Ireland that I got my hands on, at this stage of my life, probably 150,000 patients, where I began to go, oh, I see. Because people would come with these different, not just physical ailments, but spiritual issues and emotional issues. And I, as a chiropractor, had there's a line and you don't cross that line. You're there. It's like if somebody goes to a car lot and they're looking to buy a Volkswagen, and if you're constantly trying to sell them a Cadillac, life's going to be difficult. And so I had to just more kind of sit back and observe, because I had these other things happening on the side where somebody might come in and they're in for their adjustment, and their dead grandmother is standing in the corner of the room. And you suddenly realize that you might be the only person that can deliver the message that the grandmother is trying to get across. And I'm like, hey, could you come back? Because it's Tuesday and I only do that on Fridays. So the lines started to get really blurry. And so as I moved on through practice, and sign after sign after sign was, you're finished with this leg and you need to move on to the next, which is full-time metaphysics, which I was only doing on the side all the way through. I was like, okay, I hear the signs, I see the signs, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like, okay, I'll stop in December. I'll stop at Easter. I'll stop after spring break. And it was me, of the irony of it all, me who teaches people, follow, look at the signs. They're always there. And I kept pushing it and pushing it. And then finally one day, somebody came into the practice, a rugby player, and a very tall, 6'4", very well built fella. And, I was doing my spiel and I'm talking to him about his back, and I was showing him a plastic model of the spine. And he had failed to tell at the beginning that he gets weak when he goes to any kind of doctor, the dentist, if he goes to his own GP or whatever. And so I'm just chatting away, blah, blah, blah. Next thing, he does this kind of one swoop and smack, falls down on top of me, faints.
Oh, boy.
And I hear what sounds like a piece of paper tearing, and I hear kind of, and I was like, oh my Lord, please let that be my pants. And it was my shoulder, and my shoulder had ripped out of the socket when he fell on top of me. And I remember sitting in with my own doctor, and he said, well, you're finished. And I said, yeah, I know. For how long? And he goes, no, I don't think you understand. You're finished. A rotator cuff tear for a chiropractor who forever is using their arms, upper body, is kind of the kiss of death. And I went, oh my gosh. And so because I had failed to listen to the signs that had been put in front of me over and over and over again, and I was given ample opportunity to make this change. And because I wasn't listening for my own reasons, my own agenda at that stage, it was the injury that kind of pushed me out and forced me to move from that into a full-time practice of metaphysics. And so that's how that story unfolds.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I can imagine how difficult that is, having such a large young man collapse on you, and you're in this place where like, okay, now what?
Well, you know what? The universe doesn't do it by halves, and I can't turn around and go, well, that was unexpected, because it wasn't. I was given the chance to go, just time after time. And I was like, yeah, but the patients need me. And, I've got 2 small children that I'm raising on my own, and I need, I've got to be able to pay the bills, and, the money coming in from the practice, I need this. And that, every excuse that everybody can come up with. Just because I know doesn't make me immune. And I did that same thing. And then ultimately it was like another car crash moment, just only on a smaller scale, where it was like, okay, you're meant to be going this way now. Here you go. So yeah, it was an interesting time indeed.
It's quite a journey. So what does your practice look like today? Because I know you have this integrated.
Yes, I actually have a chiropractor who's from the States who works for me, and he's well settled. He has his partner and baby and another on the way, and he runs the chiropractic end of things, and then I have my healing room, and I would have space there, and I would travel around Ireland and Europe, and doing my thing, doing the metaphysical practice, and that's how I've written all of these books. I'm a great note taker and journaler, and have ended up sharing these stories with people, via these books, and that's kind of the way I'm kind of a scribe for spirit. Yeah.
Well, it's all this wisdom and knowledge that's just really like pouring through you. And it's interesting because I know that you also describe this connection with spirit as the knowing. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners, what's that like? What does that feel like?
Well, it's, as you know, in this kind of, in this way of life, the people who need you and your particular skill set are going to find you. And, and I know there are many people who are like me in various shapes and forms all across the globe. And, we're more or less stewards of humanity. We're here to serve. And so when somebody turns up, I utilize the gifts and the skills that I've developed. Some of those, like I said, speaking to those in spirit, that's been with me all of my life. After the car crash, I came back with this ability to touch somebody, and sort of download their hard drive. And so, I don't need to know what they ate for breakfast that morning or what color underwear they're wearing. The information that is relevant to me in being able to assist them to create their own healing, that's what comes through. And, at this stage in my life, I'm 51 now, all these years later, I don't have to be on the same continent. I don't have to touch somebody, but I like that one-to-one aspect of it. So I will always keep that part of my practice going, because being able to sit there, the privilege that it is to be able to step temporarily into someone else's story, because, we're just observers, traveling through life with our fellow human beings. And so I might have a different perspective or different set of skills where somebody comes with cancer or, emotional difficulties, and being able to touch them and kind of download their biography in order to elicit some kind of change in the biology is what I spend my time doing. And it's amazing. I'm in awe every single day. I tell you, you don't ever get bored doing this, because everybody coming to the table is coming with something different, a different storyline, a different set of circumstances, that for me keeps me very fresh and entertained, and allows always new stories and new information that I can share then via books, where people can have this kind of vicarious experiential experience, and possibly by reading or hearing me speak, they see some part of themselves and have that big aha.
Yeah, they're able to kind of pull everything together. And it's interesting. I know you call yourself like the connector of dots.
Yeah, a window washer to the soul.
Well, it all kind of works because, basically you're piecing things together for people. You're able to see what's going on. What are some of the unique experiences that you've had?
Oh my goodness. There's this one time, this always comes up for me. I have learned over the years, never say never, number one. And I remember I was in my first 3 books, became a trilogy. Promised was the original book, and then Circles of Light, and then The Land Beyond the River. And somewhere in that trilogy, I had gone away for a weekend, and I was writing, and somebody had gifted me coming and staying for a couple of days with my 2 girls, and who were going to be 16 and 18 very shortly. So they were quite small when this was happening. And I'd gone off for this magical, single mother away weekend where I get 3 full nights of sleep. And I got to write without having to stop and make the lunch or take the dogs out, or I just got to focus on writing for a weekend. And it was this amazing experience. And I remember returning home and running into a friend of mine, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, how was it? You were away." And I was like, "Oh, it was brilliant." I slept, and I just got up when I felt like it, and I wrote, and I hammered out all these great chapters. And this person says to me, "What do you think about past lives? And, what's your experience?" So this is again early on. And I said, "Well, I guess in some people's stories, they're relevant. In my experience, it's kind of like this compared to this." And I'm making this gesture of, an inch with my fingers as opposed to a mile with my arms. And I'm going, "Yeah, people have so much stuff to worry about, in the present. Why do we really need to go back?" And as soon as I say that, the universe decides to make a monkey out of me. And every single session for like the next 6 months, somebody shows up on my doorstep with an issue that is, very physical, very present, very disruptive to their current lives, that's based on something from a past life experience. And so this was when I got schooled, or as my girls say, I got served. And
Oh my
every
gosh.
session after this was something relevant about a past life scenario causing major disruption in present time. And so this is when I learned what that looked like. And for me, where some people might take people back through like a regression or a hypnosis where they go in and the individual sees the past life, for me, what would happen is I would sit down and it was like a mind movie would download. And I was able to see if someone is sitting in front of me with cancer or panic attacks currently, I would go back into the most relevant past or concurrent, because it is actually all happening simultaneously, the experience that's taking place that's causing disruption in present time. And so it was just time, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And so that was how I really learned to hone and develop that skill. because I made that, innocuous little statement that, yeah, it's not really relevant. Never say never, because in some people's lives, it's a huge deal. There was one lady who came in surrounded by her family, literally surrounded, because it was the only way they could get her in the door of the office. She'd been homebound for 2 years. 2 years. This was a wife, a mother, and someone who traveled regularly with her family. And almost overnight, she became trapped in her own home because the fear had become so overwhelming that initially, she noticed that she would drive up to the school gate and she couldn't get out of the car to walk the kids to the door of the school. She'd have to park the car outside of the front door of the shop because she needed to make a quick getaway. There was this impending sense of doom and lack of safety. And so 2 years later, her mother, who happened to be a patient of mine, said, listen, I know you do this other weird stuff. Here's the story with my daughter. And so they finally were able to surround, like a little posse, her family, get her out of the car, encircle her, walk her to the door. And she comes in and she said, I don't know what you think you're going to do in an hour here. I've been to every doctor and, this is just the way it is. And so this incredible story began to unfold. And, we're back in the late 1800s. I'm sitting there and I'm seeing this woman who's laying at the bottom of a stairwell, and it's dark and it's smelly. She reeked of alcohol, and her body is covered in stab wounds, and her skirts are up over her head, and she's dead. And I'm looking at this lady who's already, of course, paralytic with fear on the table, and I'm going, oh my gosh. And so I get this information. I tell her the story, and she sits up and she goes, that just makes so much sense. And she's like, I really feel for her. And she's suddenly realizing her is her, and she's the other woman, seeing and feeling and connecting with this other lifetime. And so she picks up her shoes and we walk out to my waiting room. And of course, nobody else is out there. And it's kind of this dark, overcast day in Ireland. And we're looking out the picture window, and her family is in the car outside waiting. And she's in the waiting room and she's lacing up her shoes, and she looks at me and she goes, it's kind of bizarre. That story you described just makes me think of Jack the Ripper. And like the hair just stood on end on the back of my neck. And I'm like, yeah.
Oh,
and she
wow.
goes, well, listen, thanks so much for whatever you did. And thanks for at least trying. And, she said, yeah, we'll see what happens. And she gives me this big hug, and without thinking, she walks out the door. And she's walked all the way down the sidewalk without realizing that she's unaccompanied. She's out in public. She's by herself. Her family is sitting there. I can see them in the car. Their jaws are hanging open. I'm hanging out the office door going, what is going on? And out she walks, and she doesn't even realize that she's out there in public, exposed, walking to the car. And she gets in, she waves, and I watch them all kind of like staring at me as they drive away. And I'm like, why did she just say that? Jack the Ripper. And I go back in, I Google the name that had come up during the session, because this is what happens. I'll get names, dates, details, and a very distinct name, Martha Tabram, kept coming up. And when I hear voices, and they're not like schizophrenic type of voices, these are very distinct, clear voices that will guide me and give information. They had very clearly stated during her session, this is Martha Tabram. And Martha Tabram, obviously was the woman who was dead at the end of the bottom of the stairwell. And she had reached an age that this woman had reached the same age in this lifetime. And it had triggered a series of events that had suddenly made her realize, I'm going to die. What she didn't realize was that this was another lifetime, a different story in which she did die. And it was her age that had triggered it. So as she approached the age that Martha Tabram had in a different lifetime, suddenly this overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety and impending doom comes around her. So all she knows how to do in this lifetime, with no she'd had no bad experiences. There was no reason for her to believe she was going to die. It was just this overwhelming sense of, I'm not okay. So doctors are putting this down to, anxiety, depression, mental illness of any, and it just didn't make sense. And suddenly the light bulb went on and there was something she could connect to. And so out she goes, and it was just over, just like that, just as quickly as it had come, by making the connection to the fact that she had in fact died at the same age in that lifetime. It was just over. And this is how I began to realize and understand how relevant something that happens in another experience can have an impact on somebody today. And so these cases where there doesn't seem to be an answer, or there's no medical reason, or we can't find an explanation, sometimes this is where the past life stuff is so relevant.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley in regards to her new book, Bringing Death to Life. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, and she's sharing with us her new book, Bringing Death to Life, an uplifting exploration of living, dying, the soul's journey, and the afterlife. Now, before we went for break, we were talking about how you had an appointment with a woman who was working through some real big difficulties. She had a problem leaving the home, and modern medicine really couldn't help her with any type of diagnosis. However, during your time together, she had a realization that she could have been one of the victims of Jack the Ripper. That's so amazing how something from a previous lifetime has such a huge impact and on what we're doing today, where it's actually can inhibit some people in being able to have their full expression here.
Exactly. And boy, was it a big lesson for me to keep my big mouth shut too, because, I literally spent the next 6 months of my life learning this inside and out. The book, my most recent book, which is called Understanding is the New Healing, the entire first half of that book is dedicated to those past life experiences. And then the second half dedicated to other experiences that people have had, whether it's encounters with extraterrestrials or it's encounters with, their own understandings, just via unusual experiences and different types of healings that from things that have happened in this lifetime. So, I kind of split the book in two, of half with the past life stories and half with people's other experiences with illness and healing, because it's just so relevant. And, boy, I never, ever, ever since have made light of something that hadn't been part of my experience. Therefore, it must not really mean anything. I learned a big lesson all those years ago about, the understanding is the new healing. That was really relevant for me because I needed to understand that, people's lives just aren't black and white, and every cancer isn't healed or not by chemotherapy and radiation, that there's stories behind this, and there are other reasons that are creating the series of events or the lessons that somebody is learning in their life.
Yeah. I mean, it really kind of brings everything together. And we look at it, I mean, my goodness, we're living in a time where science and spirituality are really kind of dovetailing with one another. We're, as you're here, we have doctors who are looking to heal the whole patient, not just that maybe the physicality portion, but really looking at the spiritual component underneath.
Well, absolutely. And it's so relevant for our times. And, anyone who hears this might think I'm absolutely nuts, but that's okay, because that was another thing I was gifted with at the time of my death as a 21-year-old in 1991. When I agreed to come back and do all of this stuff, one of the things I said, I only have one condition. I will go back. I will serve till the day I die, but I cannot care what other people think about me. You've got to take that away. That's got to be something that does not stand in the way of the work that you're asking me to do. And they held true to that, because I will, I'll shout it from the rooftops. If there is something going on that I can share with people, that is an experience that's outside of their perception of reality, I'm going to share it. And those with eyes to see it and those with ears to hear it, they can hear it. Those who don't, they can just, swipe on by. And, that's been a very important part, because especially with what we're all going through right now, just before this strange period of time began, I flew from Ireland over to Los Angeles to do some work. And this was kind of right on the cusp of when, before lockdown started by about a week. And I knew, leaving Ireland and coming to Los Angeles, that I was going to get COVID-19. I knew it. And I also know, because of how my life has played out and with the accident, I've known for a very, very long time the day I die. And I know the circumstances under which I die. And some people might find that creepy and freaky. For me, it's very comforting, because I have a huge window of time in which I know that this is what I'm here to do. This is how I'm going to do my work. And I also knew that I wasn't going to die from this. I knew there was another purpose. So I came here, and sure enough, within a day, the symptoms began. And, so early in March, I come down with all of the symptoms associated with the coronavirus. And what I was able to do, and this is where being a doctor comes in handy, I started doing all of these live broadcasts throughout it, because I wanted to quell people's fears. We are in this huge, crazy, and, time when nobody seems to know what's happening. Nobody knows what it looks like. And so I reported live every day that I could, because there were some days that I was quite ill. But I was like, okay, today I've lost my sense of taste and smell, and here's what that looks like. It's okay. I remember what a tortilla chip tastes like. I'm not dying here. It's okay. And this is what it looks like. Oh, today I have this rash that I named bat pox, and this is what that rash looks like. And so I was able to kind of talk people through, and I started getting, just hundreds and hundreds of people following these live sessions. And people said it was really helpful to them, because once they could see it, taste it, smell it, they knew that it wasn't something they had to be as afraid of, because now it had a face, and now it had some explanations behind it. And so I set out on this adventure with the friend that I had come to stay with, who happens to have this remarkable technology, that bioresonance technology that works based on frequency, which is, frequency is my language. That's how I work with my own clientele. But she has this kind of technology that kind of maps it, talks about what's going on. And so as the weeks unfolded, we were able to use this bioresonance to go, okay, here's what's showing up today. I've got a strong signature of heavy metal poisonings, EMF difficulties. We deconstructed the virus for people, and they're like, oh, okay. And so they began to realize, yes, while we hear the stories and we know that there are people that are dying from this, that we can start to recognize that the vast majority of us won't. And those of us who do get it and become symptomatic, this is what it looks like. And so, I've spent the last, 5-6 weeks helping people through that scenario. And I consider it part of the job description. It's what I do. Being able to take people into a space where they can set fear and uncertainty aside and going, these aren't uncertain times. These are the most certain times I've ever lived in, because these spiritual principles that I've been, quietly practicing over here in the corner, as I share them with people, they're beginning to go, oh my gosh, yes, I see this. This applies to my life. That's the experience my uncle had. That's the experience my cousin had. Oh, my husband is going through this right now. I see. And, it's utilizing the life experiences that you've had or are currently having to help give people a bigger picture of life, as opposed to the one that they're seeing on the news or on social media. It's helping them to expand and to tap into their own gifts and their own divinity and recognize, listen, don't let fear get on top of you here. Let's set fear aside for a second and let's look at what's actually happening. And let's look at the power that you have. The power that made the body also has the power to heal the body if you get out of your way.
That is so powerful, because, when we look at this, there is a lot of unknowns with this. A lot of people are having a hard time trying to decide, okay, what are some of the symptoms? This is a symptom today, tomorrow it's a new one. So what does it really look like? And being able to go ahead and have that for people where they can see it play out in real time, I think gives them a lot of peace.
Well, that was exactly the objective, because it was so funny when I first, a couple of days into it, what I was also doing with people, I was here in LA, going to different places, trying to get tested. There were no tests available. I'm like, okay, guys, it's not as easy to get a test as you think it is. And I was turned away from the hospital because of my age. So I share that with people. God, isn't this interesting? Pay attention to the fact that the doctor comes in, I'm in this isolation room, and he goes, listen, from what we know, you have every symptom and then some. You have some things that I haven't personally seen. But you need to go home under the assumption that you have this, because you check off every box. And he says, however, you're 51. And I said, yeah. And he goes, we're not allowed. We had a meeting this morning, and we are not allowed to use a test kit on anyone under the age of 70. So I go back and I tell this to people. And so I'm giving pieces of information, and they're going, okay, public testing is available. I call, I email, I do this. And so I share that with people. It's not as readily available as you think it is, people. The day I finally go, this is well after I've recovered and I knew I would be negative. I finally was able to go get a swab test. So I took them there with me. I showed them what it looked like, so that people could see what it was. And then I also go, guess what? This actually isn't, even though it's under the guise of public testing, the people there have informed us that this is actually what they call a surveillance test. It's taking a slice out of the population to get statistics on who has it, who's positive, who's negative. And I thought, how interesting, because the statistics that you're looking at, A, I had to have a car to get there. B, I had to be accepted first online via a profile that asked for my race and my age, and C, I had to be able to have access to that site, to be able to read or to have the internet in order to even be part of that. And then these statistics are going to be used to give you a broad picture of what the disease actually looks like. I don't think so. So stop looking at the statistics. Stop getting yourself so worked up over, oh my God, there's this many cases, there's this many deaths and all. And I'm going, you do realize we're at a time where if you come in and you're suspected, like I was, I'm put down as a yes, but without even having been tested. Now I had the good fortune of being able to come home to my friend's technology, which I'm testing positive every single day. And it just so happened that the day I finally tested negative on her equipment, the following day I was going in for my swab test. So I said, I'm negative today. And sure enough, my swab test came back negative. So we were able to do all this kind of research and like I said, deconstruct the fear and the virus simultaneously for people. So it's been quite the experience.
It sure sounds like it. My goodness, and what a better person than I can't think of a better person than you that would be able to go through and do this investigation on, for yourself spiritually and just, as you're going through this process, because you're able to kind of identify what's happening, journal it, and walk through, and especially with having the information that you have.
Oh, exactly. And that's the beauty. This is when we can see how powerful social media can be. We love to, pick it apart and talk about all of its negatives, but, we also see how that access to instant information, we're in real time getting to see people's experiences. And so people are able to start making up their own minds, come to their own conclusions, as opposed to just using these very bizarre figures that are out and these very skewed images that we see where, it makes great news. It's big headlines when you see, bodies in a bag and you hear that so many people have this. And then suddenly weeks later, you begin to realize, oh, everybody who was even suspected without having been tested was listed as a positive. Or the death figures that are coming in, somebody who, I actually have a friend who had, she lost her father over the last couple of weeks, and he'd had stage 4 lung cancer, and it had spread all through his body, and his death was imminent. And because he happened to be positive at the time of his death from this cancer, she was so infuriated because on his death certificate is he dies of COVID-19, not the battle that the family had gone through over the last 2 years with the stage 4 lung cancer. And these are the kind of things that we need to be aware of as people, that, don't believe everything that you see, read, hear, share your experiences, tell your stories, because it's the only way we're going to get a real picture of what's going on. And so I have, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you, my inbox is full of people sending me pictures of rashes going, oh my gosh, when you put up the rash wasn't even a symptom yet. And I had put up the picture of the bat pox, I called it. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, we see the rashes of COVID-19. There's a whole page of it now of the different types of rashes. And what we came to realize was that this is a really interesting virus, because what it seems to do is go through and it allows the body to go kind of down this trip of memory lane. It causes the body to bring up to the surface every experience that you've ever had, physically, emotionally. So some people are experiencing the virus on a very physical nature. Me, I get the symptoms. I get the high temperature. I got the rash. I got the loss of taste and smell. There are other people simultaneously at home going through their garage for the first time because they're in quarantine, and going through file papers from, 2002 and clearing out their physical space. And so each of us gets presented with an opportunity during this time to either clear out the physical body or the emotional body or the spiritual body. And so that's what's so interesting about this. I've said we've moved from a third dimension component to a fourth and fifth dimension aspect of the virus, where choice is very present. Because what was very interesting was my friend, in the beginning, it was like, oh my gosh, if somebody sneezes, you're getting it. You definitely get it. That's how it's transferred. If you touch the same surface that somebody else touched. So here's me. I'm super sick. I get sent home from the hospital. They're like, you have COVID-19. Go home and quarantine. I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment. My friend is, she stays in her room. I'm sitting on the couch, but the communal space is one room. And we're in here and I'm coughing, hacking, sneezing, and you can't wipe down every surface. And she remains well and tests negative the whole way through. And so we just kind of blew that theory out of the water right there, because she had made a very clear-cut choice, no differently than I had, going, I know I'm not going to die from this. I'm going to get it. I'm going to go ahead and get it over with. And I'm going to report to people of what this virus looks like. She said, I'm going to be the observer. I am not going to get this. I don't need to get the symptoms. And she didn't. So for something that's so virulent, and in the beginning, the talk was, if you're exposed, you're getting this. We completely disproved that by being in the same space. And, yeah, we're clean. We showered and we wiped things down, but we weren't crazy about it. We weren't Cloroxing everything. We were just living and breathing the same air. And by the theory that if you sneeze in the same vicinity, she was definitely going to get it. Nothing. Not as much as a sniffle the whole way through. And then weeks later, suddenly we find out, oh, well, maybe it's not just by, that kind of airborne particle transmission. I'm going, yeah, that's because this thing's got a frequency to it. And it has a component of choice that is involved. And whatever the individual is coming to the table with, be it physical symptoms or be it the opportunity to be at home and clear through stuff emotionally or physically clearing their space, it's going to be whatever the individual needs to experience this disease process as.
I love that, because and really there's a lot more to unpack there than just what people think. There's a lot more going on.
Absolutely.
Well, my goodness, it sounds like you've had your own miracles taking place. A lot of people with having the COVID-19, they look at this and they're like, okay, wait a minute. Once you get this, it's a done deal. You've kind of, chronological your story so that people can see. It's like, hey, people do get healthy from, recover and get healthy from this. So it's not the end game. What other miracles have you seen happen as you've done your work over the years?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. Where to begin? Healing for somebody, we kind of get into this mindset that healing is, I have something wrong with me and all of a sudden I don't. And that is so not true. And that's so not an accurate picture of what actually healing means. Because I've been in the presence of people who are taking their last breaths where they are healing in that moment. Healing means that you are seeing the big picture, that you're getting the big aha, that you're piecing together the stories of your life, the pieces and parts that you might have compartmentalized or separated from the whole, and recognizing that these are the things that you actually came here to experience. We as a people have gotten into a very bad space that we feel, we like comfort now. And if we're uncomfortable, if things are difficult, then it means something's wrong in our lives. We forget that, it's those uncomfortable moments where we grow, where we evolve. And so it's so important for people to recognize that healing is an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. It's not a place where you arrive. It's like people's misconception of what heaven is, which, you go through this death experience and you arrive in this space and you're like, oh, okay, this is just the changing dock. This is just Grand Central Station. There's so much more beyond this. It's not a final destination where you've arrived on the cloud and you're playing your harp for all eternity, sitting on the right hand of God. That's just not what it looks like. Excuse me. And the idea of getting across to people that your healing is something that's happening every single day. And if you can open their eyes and you can get them to realize that, stop trying to avoid the things that are uncomfortable, because those are where the real nuggets are. The people who cross your path, who make your life difficult, stop trying to avoid them. Sit with them. See what they have to bring to the table, because it's ironclad spiritual law that nobody can come into your life unless they have something to offer. There's always a synergistic exchange. And so because of the mindset that we've gotten into, that if my body is uncomfortable, if I'm unwell, if this person doesn't treat me kindly, that I'm not healthy. When in actual fact, those are all expressions of a healthy human experience. And so, where are the miracles? The miracles aren't always, and there are plenty of them who come to see you and you connect the dots, the light bulb goes on, they have cancer, and 3 weeks later they don't. We like to call that miraculous. But for me, sitting next to someone who's taking their last breaths and they are at peace and they have this understanding of the life that they've just led, they've just gone through a process of letting go of the misconceptions. of what having had a healthy experience means. That's miraculous to me. I had an experience when my father, he passed from Alzheimer's, and he'd led this amazing life, this highly disciplined man. He was not only just a minister, he was a headmaster of a school, and he was a football coach, and he was this great orator. And, he was identified by this fact that he was, in physical stature, he's a huge guy, such diligence with his health and well-being. And he'd made this choice, this personal choice to live a life of discipline. And so as he got into his last days, people were like, oh my gosh, I can't even look at Coach Hensley. There he is, a former, a shell of himself. He's in a diaper. He can't speak. This is horrible. And I didn't see it that way at all. I'm looking at a man who had dedicated his entire life to this discipline, to be present for people, to be an educator, to be a motivator. And that's tough. It's a hard choice to make, to show up to that every single day of your life. He never drank. He never smoked. He never swore. He lived a very, very clean life in order to teach by example the young men that he was coaching, let's say, in order to give them a role model that they might not otherwise have in their lives. And so he gets towards the end of his life, and now, he's crying, he's angry, he's cursing. And it was funny because he didn't know how to curse. So those were some of our funniest moments, because he would use these words so inappropriately. He didn't want the nurse in, "Get out of here, you hell." And I'm like, oh my gosh, Dad, you're embarrassing yourself.
Oh boy.
And, and so people look at something like that as so sad. And I'm seeing the miracle in this, that the soul who's occupied this man's body is getting the opportunity before it goes back home again to experience that anger, to experience what it was like to be frail and weak when the vast majority of his life was spent in the whole of his health and that physical prowess and discipline, and that he's getting these new experiences before he leaves. That to me is just as miraculous as the person who is suddenly healed overnight from cancer, or the person that I've gone to visit who I've been able to wake up out of a coma. Each and every thing that we have the opportunity to experience while incarnate, there's the miracle. And being able to recognize it, there's the even bigger miracle.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And I so appreciate you sharing that with us. I know in the book, Bringing Death to Life, you talk about beyond the veil and signs and messages. I'd like for you to share a little bit about that for our listeners.
Well, that was such a great project. There's an author, she's Patricia Scanlon in Ireland. She's an international best-selling author over 21 books, and her life was in popular fiction, but she's also a very dear friend of mine, and she's a deeply spiritual individual. And she had lost her mother years earlier, and then more recently had lost her father. And she said, we really should write a book about death. And it was she who kind of came up with the idea of getting together a couple of her closest friends, I being one of them, another fellow who was into healing through the angels. He's called Aidan Story. And then another lady who is a healer who lives in England called Pamela Young, who, she's the Spiritualist Church was her background. And she has been part of and privy to many different types of healings and receiving of messages. And so Trisha got us all together, and she would ask the questions, and then we would share from each of our perspectives, what we thought about death. And that's kind of how this story came to be. And one of the big things in that was, Trisha is big into her signs. When her mother passed, signs started coming to her in the form of numerical sequences. And we would speak about this often. And I'm like, well, Trisha, this happens to a lot of people. And she's like, I know, let's write about it. And so we started sharing. So Aidan would give his perspective about signs. I would give mine. One of my favorite stories in there, my own mother, we all call Mama Helen. She's just picture of Betty White. She's 91 next week. She's this amazing, vibrant, healthy individual, just with full of joy. And she's that individual who lights up a room. You're never going to be the same after having been in her presence. She's just that kind of person with her positivity. And she's, it's such a joy and a privilege to have had her as a mother. And so she had flown over to Ireland this a couple years ago, and Trisha was celebrating the 25th or the silver anniversary of her very first novel called City Girls in Ireland. And she, my mom had just gotten out of the shower after her flight, and she was in her little bathrobe and her little, her little cap where she had her little hair pin curled underneath. And she was just adorable. And Trisha and I were out talking about this book. And Mama Helen walks out, and Trisha gives her a big hug. And she goes, "Oh, how I wish my mother was here to celebrate with us. She would have loved this." And she's holding a copy of the book in her hand. And next thing, we're all standing there, and this coin, right? The three of us are there, hits the floor at our feet. And we're all just kind of standing there going, where did that come from? And what was interesting, this is, 2018, maybe 2017. This coin that has fallen is a big silver Irish punt. Now, the Irish punt has been out of circulation since I think it was 2001 when we switched to the euro. So out of thin air drops this coin. And it could have been any coin, a copper coin, a euro coin. It was a silver Irish punt. At the moment that she hugs my mother, saying, "Oh, I miss the feel of my mother's hug, and I wish she was here to see the celebration of the silver anniversary of this book." And bam, that coin falls at our feet. And all we could do was laugh. We laughed, we cried. It was this clear-cut sign from her mother going, "I'm here, and I see exactly what's going on." And so many people have stories like this. And so what we wanted to do with Bringing Death to Life was share some of our own stories so that people would start talking about their own. And that's how Bringing Death to Life was born. And we would talk about things like signs, and we'd talk about things like the end of death experience. We went from everything from the miraculous to the very practical. And, it was interesting because our publishers, Hachette Publishing in the beginning, they were absolutely wonderful. But I know there were some doubts going, guys, this has death. Not only is it about death, it's got death in the title. Don't know how well this is going to go over. And it went straight to number one upon release. People were ready to talk about it. And people wanted to then share their stories. And oh my gosh, what opened up afterwards, the dialogues it created. People telling about their signs and people talking about their little miracles. Families that were healing. And it was just such an incredible time. And it was so great because living in Ireland, the one thing the Irish are really good about is celebrating death. They still have the 3-day wake. They still have the tradition where, the life is a celebration of life, and it goes over the course of a few days where the families get together. There's the open casket in the house, and people are leaned up against it, drinking cups of tea and sharing old stories, and kids are running around. Death is very normalized there. I return home. I'm American. I grew up in America, and it's always very different to me because the incidence of people being, old and maybe hooked up to machinery on tons of medication, and everybody's stories are different. And there are some people where that is their truth. That's their necessity. It has to be that way. And I completely understand that. But really, as a society, we have kind of steered away and done everything that we can to get away from death, because death is the enemy. Death is an inevitable part of life for all of us. And what I love about Ireland is that it's a very normalized part of conversation. It's a very normalized part of everyday life. And we wanted to kind of bring some of that to the light and into the world so that people could remember that just as birth is a necessity of getting us here and allowing us to have the experience, death is but a doorway allowing us to move from one book to another.
Well, how positive is that? And, it's so inspirational. Bringing Death to Life had a lot of great information in it, Mary Helen. I really enjoyed the read. You guys did very well writing it. And the
Thank you.
publishers, I can see why it was a number one bestseller. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about this book?
Well, they can connect with me personally on my website at, so it's www.maryhelenhensley.com. And, Bringing Death to Life and any of our other books, they're all available on Amazon or at any good bookstore. So yeah, that's, it's pretty easy nowadays to kind of get in touch with those publications. And yeah, so that's on Amazon, and it's also available on my own website and on each of the other authors, Tricia Scanlon, Aidan Story, Pamela Young. I think probably at this stage, Amazon is the easiest spot to hook up with that. And yeah, that's where we are.
Well, Mary Helen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to share that part of my own story, and hopefully it brings some peace, comfort, and healing to whoever listens.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mary Helen. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Bringing Death to Life. Bringing Death to Life is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to connect with Dr. Mary Helen, you can at maryhelenhensley.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Mary Ann airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.